I'm Stuart Pimm. I'm the president of Saving Nature. And we have a new project. We're very, very excited by it. And the head of the project is Professor Natalia Ocampo-Peñuela. I first met Natalia a few years back when I was in Bogota and she wanted to come and do her PhD with me, and she did. Then went back to Colombia for a bit and is now um, a professor at the University of California at Santa Cruz. And Natalia has established herself as a leading and very charismatic leader of conservation, particularly in Colombia, but really across Latin America. I mean, Colombia is number one in birds, but we're also excited to see Colombia becoming, number one in ornithology too. And so a few years ago, she approached us to see if we could help with a project in the Eastern Andes, an area of exceptional richness. It wasn't quite right for us at the time, but it was for the American Bird Conservancy, and I'm very happy that Dan Levitt is on this Zoom. But as the project developed, we realized that to be successful, we needed to help the group there acquire land and plant a lot more trees and expand the forest. It's an area where there's been a lot of deforestation. And so with that, I'm handing it back to you, Andy, and we're very much looking forward to what Natalia is going to tell us this evening. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Stuart and Natalia. We're thrilled to have you here as a seasoned conservationist and expert speaker. That includes Ted X. We're just delighted to hear your expertise. Could you tell us about the backstory and how this project came about?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Good evening or afternoon, wherever you are. I'm in California, so it's still sunny over here. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I want to start by sort of acknowledging that I'm here as part of a collaborative effort. I'm sort of like the scientific advisor, or as they like to call me, the Antpitta godmother. And I really work and elevate the work of Fundación Camaná, who are the local partners who are really the ones doing the conservation on the ground, and they're here in the call. Also, as part of the group is Dan Levin by representing ABC. And so I just want to like say that I'm here speaking about this project, but it's a project that's very much a collaboration. And so I just wanted to put that at the front. A while back, let's say it was 2019, I think, people from Fundación Camaná, Elvis and Natalia Otero, who were working for the government, basically went to this area and were giving workshops about birdwatching tourism. And there was someone in the workshop who approached them and said, look, I've seen this like little brown bird that's really rare in my property. And so, of course, they immediately knew it was the Cundinamarca Antpitta. And so they connected, and they basically wanted to develop bird watching tourism, or to see how they could study this bird. So they connected with the family, found the bird, got to really get close to the bird by feeding it worms, which is something that we do very commonly with antpittas because they're so rare to see. And there started like that connection between Fundación Camaná and the Herrera family in this place, and they quickly realized that there was a lot of deforestation in the area, and that to protect the species, they needed to protect habitat. So there was like also a connection with Peter Kaestner, who actually was the one who saw this species to be undescribed to science for the first time in 1989, and had not seen the species for many years, came back to the place with John Myers, who used to work for Audubon, and basically we're like, we need to do something about this bird. So they wrote a proposal. That was when Stuart mentioned, like, we went to Saving Nature to say, like, do you want to fund this? And at that time, we weren't ready for that connection, but American Bird Conservancy was able to donate funds to buy 180 hectares of forest that became the now Refugio del Tororoi nature reserve that is managed by Fundación Camaná. And so there's lots of habitat where it's like the prime habitat for the Cundinamarca Antpitta that likes to live in the cloud forest. And since that project started, we've been doing natural history studies to find out more about the bird. And so I've been sort of providing my expertise as an ornithologist on like, how do we know more about where it is, where it's its elevational range, like how many are there in the forest. And so with Fundación Camaná, we've done some studies of population estimates and knowing about its elevational range. But what we really identified to be a threat is sort of the kind of encroaching lowland deforestation that seems to be like eating up the range of the Cundinamarca Antpitta. And these studies told us that the sort of preferred habitat, this bird is very particular. It only likes to live in cloud forest, only in the eastern Andes, and it really only likes to live between 22 and 2,300 meters above sea level, mostly, even though it uses a wider band, but it's still very narrow. And that's where most of the deforestation is. So we thought like this is where saving nature can come in, because we can buy some land that's currently pasture and restore it so that we can connect the Refugio del Tororoi that was funded by American Bird Conservancy to other regional protected areas in the lowlands. And so we can keep the sort of the elevational range of a species conserved. So not too long ago, a few months ago, we wrote a proposal. We went to the reserve with Saving Nature, and basically it's worked out that we've gotten a donation, and Fundación Camaná has just finished the purchase of one piece of land and is about to finalize the purchase of another piece of land. These are all cattle pastures that will be restored back to forest. So that's it in a nutshell.
Wow. And what will the first 12 to 24 months of restoration look like on the ground once the cattle pastures are out and natural regeneration starts?
Yeah, that's a good question. So if you think about restoration, you can take sort of two paths. One is called active restoration, where you go and plant a lot of trees. Another is sort of more passive or natural regeneration. And that decision depends on like how long ago that area was deforested. When the area has lost forest for a long time, you might have lost the seed bank, or maybe there isn't forest nearby that can replenish the seed bank. But the forest here hasn't been lost for that long, maybe a few decades, and there is still a lot of forest around. And so we think that really the main sort of limitation to that restoration has been the presence of cattle in these areas. And we've seen in other parts of Refugio del Tororoi, when we were there, we basically went to visit these areas. As soon as you remove the cattle and fence off the area and you just let the forest come back, it's pretty effective. We saw a place that had been sort of being naturally restored for 6 months, and it was pretty big. It was like, taller than me, bushes, and all the trees are coming up. And so our main goal right now is first to document the state of the land right now with drones. And so Fundación Camaná has a partner that will fly drones all around the area. Then we're going to fence off to prevent the cattle from encroaching and eating all the saplings. And then we're going to monitor what happens to natural regeneration and sort of adapt as we go. So have a botanical assessment at the beginning, which plants are there. After 12 months, what is the identity of the plants that have come in, and if those plants are native or not, and if those plants are the kind of trees that we want for that forest to be restored. If that's not the case, then we're going to contribute with some native species to do a bit of active restoration also. So I think it's like a process of like, first we see what nature can do, we adapt to that and maybe supplement with a few trees, and then we sort of monitor over time. And I think the idea of monitoring by drone is a really good one, because we can see how the land cover is changing and how that connectivity is going to be restored in, maybe not that long. It takes like 3 years for this to be like more like bush. And this Antpitta, she likes the forest, but she's also able to move in sort of like brushy areas. Like she's been seen in like blackberry patches. And so we think that even just in a few years, the Antpitta will be moving through these restored areas.
And what makes the Antpitta so vulnerable, and why is continuous forest cover in the area non-negotiable for its survival?
Yeah, it's interesting because I actually really like colorful birds. And I think like why do I work with this brown bird? And this brown bird is one of the world's rarest birds. If you look at the range map, it's really, really tiny. It's found only in this area of Colombia. Its total range is about 1,400 square kilometers. So basically, if it disappears from this small area, it's going to go extinct forever, right? And so the disproportionate effect on working on an endangered species is that you are really preventing its global extinction by doing very localized work. And because basically within those 1,400 square kilometers, only 350 of those are still forest, and the rest have already been deforested. So there's a lot that has been lost already. A lot of the connectivity has been lost. I think the encroaching, as I said, of the lowland elevation sort of tells us that it's important that we act quickly. And of those 350 square kilometers of forest that are left, only 20% are in protected areas. So it is really a species that globally is of conservation importance because it's not very protected, it's endemic, it's endangered, and these local actions can really have important effects for its conservation.
I mean, Natalia is sort of impugning this little bird because it's not very colourful. And of course she's right. But it has to be said, these antpittas are just absolutely adorable little birds. They have enormous character. There's one that I saw up above Cali last year, which hasn't got a scientific name, but the local name is Salsita. Cali is the world capital of salsa. Salsita means a little salsa. And when it sort of hops towards you, it does this little salsa dance. And so they are just absolutely engaging and brown, yes, but crammed full of personality.
It's true, and I think, antpittas are only found in the neotropics, so it's a very special group of birds. They are like little people walking in the forest, and they're really difficult to see because they're always in the understory. And so these photos that you see here that make you think like you would just walk in the forest and encounter a Cundinamarca antpitta, these pictures are taken at the antpitta feeder that the Herrera family maintains with support from Fundación Camaná, and basically. Don Ariel, the person from the family, has worked every day feeding these antpitta worms from the forest and has trained it to come and eat these worms. And why he did that is because bird watchers like myself, like Stuart, will want to see this bird. It is the only place where you can see it, and people will pay money to come and see it. And so if it's been trained, and now bird watchers can go and basically get an amazing look at a bird that is extremely rare globally without really bothering it much because it just comes out every day at 8 a.m. She likes it a little late. Feed the worms, few seconds, it's there, hops around, you see it really well, and then it leaves and it goes around its day. And so they are really, I make the joke about colorful birds, but I really love antpittas, and I think this one, every time I see her, she kind of like steals my heart. So.
Aw, that's adorable. And you mentioned that family that feeds those birds worms and how bird watching helps them and allows them to benefit conservation wise, but also benefit economically. How do you see bird watching as an opportunity to do conservation and economic development?
Yeah, so I think this place is actually a pretty good example of how birdwatching tourism, when done correctly and in equitable ways, can contribute to conservation, but also to economic development. So the Herrera family, who found the antpitta there and have been working with Fundación Camaná, live in a very small piece of land, about 2 hectares, and they used to farm blackberries, and that was their livelihood. And the blackberry crop is very volatile, like the price changes a lot, and it was a very small crop of blackberries. Once they trained the antpitta and started feeding it, they decided to stop the blackberry production because the money that they could get from the antpitta feeding was more than what they were getting before. And they basically got really excited about conservation and about working with Fundación Camaná to keep this habitat. And so they replaced their economic activity from agriculture, which was damaging to the area. they have now restored that place where the blackberries were and now live off of birdwatching tourism and working with Fundación Camaná. So you can think of birdwatching tourism as a way that families that live in these rural areas can earn income from doing conservation and have the possibility of staying in their home while also keeping the forest. And this has happened in lots of other places in Colombia. We have one of our main sort of themes of research in my group right now is birdwatching tourism, and we study it in like very localized cases like this one. We did a study on all the Antpitta feeders in Colombia and what economic benefits this brings. But we've also studied like from eBird data, like what are the patterns of birdwatching tourism globally. And Colombia is like basically the new sort of up and coming birdwatching tourism place where birdwatching tourism has grown 40x since 2010, and it continues to grow. And so this becomes like basically what Colombia is now being known for. Instead of like all this bad image that we had before, we're now replaced by like we're the country of birds, and this tourism is bringing a lot of both national and international tourism to these places. People are coming to see the birds and bringing economic development, but one that is sort of sustainable and like goes hand in hand with conservation if it's done in the right way, which in the case of the Cundinamarca Antpitta is a really good example. His family still is the one that manages the operation. They work with Fundación Camaná with funding from American Bird Conservancy. They've just finished building these cabins that Stuart and I stayed at recently. So all this new development is sort of allowing conservation to exist alongside a family and an endangered species all at once.
That's an incredible story. That family just sounds so amazing. And if anyone listening wanted to go and see the family and go check out the birds, how would they be able to do that?
Yeah, you can look it up online. Gerson, who's the son of the family, also a really cool story. The two children in the family have now become obsessed with birds. One of them is a bird watching guide now, Gerson, and Shaira, who's the youngest daughter, she's also like really knows a lot of the birds, like takes the tourists around. So really that has become like a real life-changing thing for the family. So you can contact them and basically make a reservation and stay in the cabins. Maybe we can put in the chat like how you can reach out to them, because now they have lodging, and so you can like go up there and stay for the night to see the Antpitta in the morning.
Yes, we'll make sure to put that in the chat in the end, and also in the follow-up email of this recording to everyone, we'll include that link as well. And by the way, if anyone has any questions for Natalia or any comments, please feel free to drop them in the chat. I had a question around some of the other. I didn't realize it wasn't just the Antpitta that's there. There's all these other beautiful species I included too. Which species will benefit first from the new connection, and how will you track early wins?
Yeah, so the maybe everyone here knows, but I'll just remind us all that Colombia has more bird species than any other country on Earth. And also most of this diversity comes from basically having three ramifications of the Andes and lots of different habitats. And so we're located on the eastern Andes here, and there is a high concentration of species that have very small ranges that are rare besides the Antpitta. So the Cundinamarca Antpitta shares its habitat with another 30 species of bird that are have small ranges or are endemic or are endangered. Some of the ones of note are this one pictured here is the flame-winged or brown-breasted, depending on what taxonomy you follow, parakeet that's endemic to the eastern Andes of Colombia. Really hard to see. I went like 3 times to this place before I could spot one, and they are very mobile. And so these parakeets are ones that would like specifically benefit from connectivity, because parakeets like will sleep in one place and then will travel around the area looking for food all day before returning to the same roosting site. And connectivity is very important to facilitate this movement and sort of increase the area that is effective for them for looking for food. And of course, also endemic and endangered. There's also the black and chestnut eagle, which is not range restricted, but is endangered for other reasons. The ochre-breasted brushfinch is one that you can see just on the trail to go to see the Antpitta. That is near endemic. It's endemic to the eastern Andes of Colombia and the Cordillera de Mérida in Venezuela. And another one that's not bird, but that's pictured here is the Andean bear or the spectacled bear. So Fundación Camaná put out some camera traps and they captured an Andean bear, which is like incredible. These animals need a lot of forest. They are, endangered because of hunting. And so it's incredible that the reserve is also preserving habitat for a big mammal that needs a large area.
And for those of us who are of a British persuasion, this is the Paddington bear. This is the
Oh, really?
Right. Looks exactly like that.
I was thinking about it.
and talk about a charismatic animal. I mean, quite irrespective of its popularity in the in the wonderful books about Paddington Bear. I mean, one of the things we do at Saving Nature is we stitch together habitats. We take habitats that are fragmented and we help local communities buy the land and reforest. And we do that because we think it's a very cost-effective way of doing conservation. So we're highly focused. And Colombia is just an amazingly beautiful country. I mean, it's got three big mountain ranges, and then it's got a couple of others in the north as well. And so you can be in areas where you really feel remote and you're surrounded by beautiful birds and orchids and everything else. We're very happy to be working there at Saving Nature. We're thrilled to be working with American Bird Conservancy and other partners. This is an important part of the world for us. Anyway, Natalia.
Yeah, one other thing I'll say, Andy, is that the Eastern Andes of Colombia are actually quite the popper of protected areas. There are a lot like different, national parks and community-owned lands that protect habitats. And the Eastern Andes is not a place in Colombia that has a lot of protected areas. And so you can think of conservation as like you can do conservation in places where it's most needed, like you place this protected area here. In the case of Refugio del Tororoi, we're basically like abutting a big protected area that's very continuous. And so we're basically expanding the conservation impact of an existing protected area by protecting a little bit, but also by reconnecting it to other regional protected areas. So like Stuart was saying, like you can have a very small action that if it's targeted correctly can have a disproportionate impact in the regional connectivity and conservation of habitat.
It's unbelievable. I had a question around your use of spatial tools to plan where land buys matter most. Which data sets guide a decision like this, and what threshold tells you buy here and not there?
Yeah, that's a great question. And this is like, I guess, my career. When I went to Stuart's lab, I didn't know how to make maps. And now my entire career is about making maps. And basically, like when I was doing my PhD, I tried to use existing range maps to see, for example, where is the highest concentration of birds that are in need of conservation. And that can guide where we decide to protect or not protect. And we found that those maps were actually not that good. They were missing a lot of areas that had species. And so I've spent some of my career sort of working with others to build better distribution maps for birds in Colombia. And now we build maps that are a combination of like expert opinions. So basically maps that are drawn by people that know a lot about biogeography, but we combine that with eBird data and knowledge of species presence to build range maps that are a lot more accurate. And so we've done that for Colombia recently for like 1,600 species of bird. And we use those maps to see like where are the highest concentrations of birds that need conservation action. So they're endangered, they have a small range, and that sort of guides the regional prioritization. But once we know of a region, we want to choose areas that have lost a lot of habitat or where we identify this connectivity to be key. And so another part of my work right now is on mapping habitat connectivity at scales that are sort of regional. And so we take these range maps and we use some parameters and models to see like how species would move through landscapes and where would you protect to basically like allow birds to move in the forest and where you could have the biggest impact. And that will tell you where to protect forest. But another thing you can do is find out where you could restore habitat to enhance connectivity, where you've lost it and you can bring it back. And we do this by looking at satellite images of the forest. We basically like, where are the protected areas, where are the birds, and where is the forest? And if we bring back the forest, where can we have the biggest impact? And in this case, we also use drones of like, basically Fundación Camaná has flown drones around and we can see all the areas that are potential for buying for conservation, which one would have the biggest impact in if it was to be restored.
It's so incredible how technology has evolved to help conservation, and even something like drones, a recent invention, I believe. I didn't remember hearing about it till like 10 years ago, and now it's completely changed conservation. You don't have to actually go to the site. And Michael has a great question and is asking the right person. For those of us who have never gone on a bird watching vacation, can you make the case for us?
Oh, yes, Michael, I'd be happy to. I think birds are, a passion that if you develop this passion, they will take you everywhere in the world. There are birds everywhere. There are birds in Antarctica, in the North Pole, in the tropics. Everywhere you go, there are birds. And so it's a hobby that can really take you to lots of places and really allow you to connect with nature because you go looking for birds. You go to an amazing place, you go walk in a forest quietly and just sort of take it in while you look for these birds. And I think there are ways that you can start bird watching because it might seem overwhelming. Imagine if you go to Refugio del Tororoi and there are like 700 species that have been recorded there. How do I know them all? And so first I would say you hire a local guide who can tell you all the birds that are there. And second, you go to places where you have a more intimate relation with these birds. Like if you go to Refugio del Tororoi and you go to this hide that Dan Levin put here as a picture, you basically sit there and wait for this Antpitta to come out and you sort of like acquaint yourself with these birds. And the same happens with like banana feeders or hummingbird feeders where you can like see these birds up close. But I think if you went on a bird watching vacation in Colombia, I can assure you probably wouldn't be able to like stop watching birds ever because they're full of color. They're everywhere. There's always like more to discover. So yeah, I invite you to try it out, and you can help a family if you are going to the right places.
I have a photo of you having fun on a bird watching trip right here with the toucan. So there's some evidence of something maybe you could do, Michael. And you completely asked the right people. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people on this call are thinking, oh, I know some great reasons you should go bird watching. Um, and
I think one of the reasons it's addictive
Carson, come on.
is that you go out and you see some birds and you may identify maybe 10, 15 species of bird. You hear, wow, that's a lot of birds, and some of them are very pretty and very interesting. And then you go out and you see a few more, and then a few more, and then you think, there's one there in the book I'd really like to see, and you go to the place where you see that. And 20 years later, you've seen 5,000 species of bird. It's a progressive addiction where you feel, I've just got to see another one in another place. But as Natalia points out, I mean, I've watched birds from penguins in Antarctica to gulls in the Arctic. And it takes you to some truly amazing places, of which Colombia is one of them.
Stuart and Talia, I actually have a quick question. Do you know how many birds you've seen?
Andy, do we know how many birds we've seen? Yes. Actually, this might be a sore point. I recently in the summer, I'm not obsessive with the birds, but I do like to see new birds. It is like a really cool thing to travel around. And I recently went to Colombia with actually my research group, and I got my 4,000th bird. And so now I'm like a little bit above 4,000, and it was really special. A bird that I'd been like wanting to see for a long time in the Amazon. I believe Stuart is more in like the 5,000 range. Yeah.
That's unbelievable.
On the other, I've been at it a lot longer than you have, Natalia.
Yeah.
But it does get to the point where when you see this little, very charismatic little brown bird, it's very exciting. So
And this bird, so the Cundinamarca Antpitta was a bird that I had looked for about 3 times in this road and had never been able to see. And I got my what we call a lifer. The first time you see this bird, I got it with the Herrera family and with Fundación Camaná at this exact place when I went in November 2019, I think. I sat there and it hopped out, and I was like, wow, all this time I waited, and now it's we're close friends now.
And Felipe wanted to know, speaking of that, he would love to know more about the Herrera family's transition from agriculture to ecotourism and how Fundación Camana may have helped. We work, and then he says we work closely with the Ecuadorian family who transitioned to bird watching as well on their own, and we're always looking for ways to help empower them to strengthen their business and capabilities.
Yeah, that's a really good question, Felipe. And I want to go back to the point that I actually really enjoyed this particular project because to me it's a good example of a collaboration between lots of different people that each have a role. And the Herrera family and Fundación Camaná have from the beginning worked together. Fundación Camaná has helped a lot with the sort of training and support to develop this birdwatching knowledge. And the Herrera family are basically the stewards of this land and of these birds. And with the funding from American Bird Conservancy, there are now like cabins that will support the birdwatching tourism. And one of the things that I want to point out is that Fundación Camaná has kept this relationship to be really well sort of structured and documented. It's like sometimes these relationships with communities can change over time. And in this case, like there are always these agreements, written agreements, conservation agreements, agreements on how the income from birdwatching tourism will be handled, agreements of what is the role of the Herrera family versus Fundación Camaná versus ABC versus Natalia in the project. And that transparency and sort of that structure to that relationship, I think has been really effective. So when the hide started, there was no place to stay, but it's always been clear that the Herrera family kind of handles the birdwatching tourism part, but that birdwatching tourism income sort of depends on the conservation done by Fundación Camaná that's funded by Saving Nature and American Bird Conservancy. And so there is this like mutualism, but that is very structured. And I think I like to point this out because it's a good guideline on how to develop and maintain these relationships to be sustainable over time. So that's been like their transition was basically like they've been documenting the income that they get from birdwatching tourism. And so people go to see the Antpitta, but they need transportation. And so the Herrera family also offers the 4-wheel drive transportation that you need from the town. And so they get income from that. They also offer the meals that the bird watchers eat while they're there, and the entry, what they pay for the entrance goes like some to the Herrera family and some to Refugio del Tororoi and Fundación Camaná. And so there's like just like a very well sort of structured and determined role of like what are the benefits and the costs and who carries them, and a very equitable distribution of that. And so it's so far worked, and I have faith that it will continue to work that way.
I mean, one of the wonderful things about Colombia is how good the food is, because it's a multicultural country with all sorts of different influences. From the Caribbean, from the Afro-Colombian communities, the indigenous communities, Spanish communities. Food in Colombia is just fantastic, and it's not just the coffee. Obviously, you can get an incredibly good cup of coffee there. But it is a country that's a lovely place to visit in terms of its quite extraordinary culture. So, we bird watchers are people who like to bird hard, but we also like to have a good meal at the end of the day.
Some of us certainly do. I think something that was really kind of like, shows you the growth mindset that anyone can have is that this family really has like embraced tourism. And so now you go and she cooked like meatballs, but vegetarian meatballs. She has all these like new knowledge of like, I want to learn how to cook for the tourists and how to offer these services in ways that are really of really high standards. And I think that's really cool. Like they just decided like, this is what we're going to do. And we're going to this is the guide, we guide like this, we learn all the birds, but we also like learn hospitality and how to cater to these tourists. And so when we were there, it was really, really cool to see that they have all these options and sort of innovative ways of cooking traditional food, but like for vegetarians and for vegans. Yeah, so the food and the coffee were also really good.
And Matt Cameron says, such an amazing, well-organized project. Well done. And I completely agree. Moving to a topic that I think needs to be addressed. I do have other questions, but you talked briefly about deforestation and fragmentation, how that drove this crisis going on right now in Colombia. What are the current pressures in this valley, and where do you see the highest risk of setback?
Yeah, I think deforestation has been historically really high in the Andes because of Colombia. Around 70% of its human population lives on the Andes. That's where most of the cities are. And the deforestation is kind of like for two reasons. One is to plant whatever crop grows there. In this case, can be blackberry, onions, potatoes. In the lowlands, it can be oil palm, rice, soy. And also for cattle pasture. And unfortunately, in this area specifically, there are a lot of cattle pastures. But when we visited these places and with Saving Nature, we went there, it's basically these very steep slopes with really bad grass where you're not being very effective in producing cattle. Like it's really not the vocation of the land to produce cattle there. But there's a strong kind of cultural element that in Colombia, like having cattle is sort of a sign of wealth. And it's just like traditional for every family to have like a piece of land that has cattle on it. And so despite this cattle not being very economically viable or sustainable, people will still have it in these areas. So that is sort of like one of the biggest issues in that causes deforestation. This place is actually not that far from a main road. It's like about about 1 hour ride, but because the road is really bad. And so there's a lot of access to it, and people will, cut down trees also for using the wood, or they will go hunting in these places. As far as setbacks, I think the main thing that we're going to do, and a lot of funds will be spent on like fencing off this area to prevent the cattle going in and sort of stopping the natural restoration. Because as these saplings come out, the cattle can come and eat them or step on them, and that can really hinder the natural regeneration process. And so fencing it is going to be very important. The other thing that can be sort of like a setback is encroachment by like hunters that use dogs to hunt. And I think this is why it's so important to work with the local people, because this local family who's there are the ones actually patrolling these areas and working with those communities and sort of keeping that area safe. Like over here, sitting in UC Santa Cruz, like I'm not, I'm not doing anything to prevent that. And they're the ones who are actually taking care of it. So I have a lot of faith in projects like this because you are working with the local people that are on the ground doing the work. Like Fundación Camaná has an office there. They go there all the time. They're always sending me videos of the birds and of the forest there. So I don't think that there's a lot of chance that we'll have a setback on this one.
And I just thought that was important. This was important to address because this is the kind of challenges that you're taking head on. And I think it's so important to talk about. At the same time, there's a lot of victories and things that I was really interested in hearing more about, like what data are still missing from the Andean birds, and how do these gaps shape risk for species like the Antpitta?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So one of the things that we work on, as I said, is like building these better maps and basically like identifying data gaps. And in Colombia, there are a lot of data gaps that come from lack of access to areas. So perhaps we haven't been able to go there as scientists because it's far away. There are no roads, no rivers, but also because of armed conflict. And so a lot of Colombia is just unexplored by scientists. There are, of course, locals who live in these places, but we lack a lot of data in areas like in the Pacific, in the Llanos, in the Amazon. In this area, in the Andes, the Eastern Andes, I would say, is one of the most underbirded and understudied parts of the Andes in Colombia. The Central and the Western Andes have more people doing work there. But the Eastern Andes, in the same way that it's not very well protected, it's also not very well studied. And so I think like a lot of information we're finding out is new. The Antpitta, for example, we didn't know much about it. In fact, we still don't know a lot about it. We still don't know like where it nests, how many chicks they'll have, how often, like a lot of this natural history, basic information that anyway in the US for any bird, in the UK for any bird, they will know all of this about it. And we don't really know that. And it's part of the work that we're doing with Fundación Camaná is doing population estimates and looking for researchers to go and study the natural history of the Cundinamarca Antpitta. These other birds, like, so I want to tell a really cool story. I don't know if Stuart knows this, but the new property that was just bought by Saving Nature, when we were there, they told us that there has been a nest of a black and chestnut eagle before, which is this one pictured here. And it turns out they're building it again. And they've just sent me a video from Fundación Camaná of these eagles that are working on this nest. This is a really difficult to see eagle. And if they nest there, for one, it means the forest is really high quality and we're conserving this species that is endangered, but also that bird watchers can go and see it there. And so this is basically like the harpy eagle of the mountain. It's really one of the most powerful eagles, like incredible sight. And we can see it now in the new property that was bought with Saving Nature funds. And so we're super excited to, of course, see the eagle, monitor what it's happening with its reproduction, and also to take bird watchers to see it up close over there, including me. I've never seen one at the nest, so I'm dying to go.
Rose Gold says that's amazing, and I agree. And I was wondering about impittas. Do they get hunted at all? Is that a risk at all, or is that not really a thing? And then my other question, if that's not the case, is you said we don't really know the population right now. Do you have any rough number of how many there are?
Yes. So the first question is, yeah, they don't really get hunted. I think they could be, for instance, affected by the presence of dogs, like hunting dogs. So people won't hunt them actively, but hunting presence and dogs can really disrupt their breeding, for example, because we suspect breed near the ground or anyway, they're walking on the ground and dogs can scare them. And so despite that not being the number one threat, there is definitely something that needs to be, that basically habitat loss is their main source of endangerment, but also like presence of hunting dogs. I was trying to look up quickly the population estimate for the Antpitta, and I can't find it, but it's we did this like population estimate, and I can't find it.
No worries.
Natalia, I think it was somewhere like around 24, maybe birds in the reserve. It was like in the 20s, I think.
24 total, though. It was like six individuals per square kilometer or something like this.
Really?
So, around there.
Yeah.
And that's incredible. 24. That must be it really is one of the rarest birds.
Yeah. And one thing that we want to do really, Andy, is to sort of like study the entire range of the Antpitta and do an estimate like in the entire area, where do we find the highest concentrations of the species? Because basically there can be variability of habitat. And for, this project is going to grow. This is kind of like we have ABC, we have Saving Nature, but we want to protect more and more habitat. And we want to protect it in the place that it would have the greatest impact for the species. So we're thinking about maybe we set out audio recorders all around and see where we detect the species the most. And we do like on the ground surveys to identify where they are, because they're rare. Their densities are not very high, like they need a big area. And so that's how we will prioritize the future efforts.
And I just wanted to end this with maybe a great field story. Then we could open up to questions. So feel free to type questions into the chat, anything you want to ask. I have some if we can't think of any, but do you have a great field story you maybe feel like sharing with everyone here?
Yeah. So I'll tell the story of this bird that I'm holding right there. That's a Magdalena ant bird, endemic to Colombia, to a different region, a dry forest of the Magdalena Valley. And we caught this bird in an all-women expedition that we did recently to honor the legacy of a a bird collector from the 1900s. I was 7 months pregnant in this picture, and we went with 4 other women to do this expedition to basically resurvey the site that she had surveyed in the 1900s. And when we were setting up the nets the night before, we heard this bird, and this is like an endemic bird, and we were like, man, wouldn't it be cool to catch that Magdalena antbird? And the next day we opened the mist nets, and the first bird in the net was this exact one. This is the male of the Magdalena antbird. And so that was really cool. And I now have it. I actually have it here. It was knitted for me as an amigurumi or something by one of the expedition participants.
That is unbelievable. Wow. So please feel free to ask some questions in the chat. I have another one. Oh, we got one from Larry. Larry wants to know, can you use GPS tags to monitor the ant pittas and find nest, home range, etc.?
Larry, that is like my dream. So GPS tags, you could use GPS tags that if you had basically, okay, so there are tags that you need an antenna for. And so if you put one of these tags and you follow with the antenna, you could basically see where the bird is moving. But this requires a lot of human power to basically go with the antenna, like beep beeping. Now there are tags, GPS tags that communicate to satellites. So you can put them on and the bird will move and you will get this information. But this bird lives in the forest floor. And so it's really hard for these GPS tags to sort of charge with the sun. With some of them, like I use these tags for geese in open areas and they work really well. But because this bird is inside the forest, like we would put it on and then we would have to use the like antenna method because we wouldn't be able to use satellite tags. A lot of these tags are also like the ones that are satellite are not small enough for birds like this Antpitta. And so I think this is like a dream that I think will be within reach in like 5 to 7 years. But right now it would require using the tags and also having a lot of human power to do that. So if there was a student that wanted to do it, for example, that would be an awesome research project, like an undergraduate thesis. But right now we don't have anyone who can do it.
Thank you, Larry. Thank you, Natalia. I had a question while we're waiting for more to come in. You actually gave a TED talk, and I don't know meet too many people that have done that. What was that process like for you?
So I don't know. There was a TED event in Santa Cruz, and it was my friend who works at the university. Like he said, "Oh, did you see there's like a TED? You have to apply." And I said, "Well, I don't think I can do this." He said, "Well, I think you should apply." And so the day before the application was due, I was like, "Okay, fine, I'm gonna apply." So you had to like send a video and write what is your idea. And so my big idea that I pitched, I guess, was that birdwatching tourism can serve to both do conservation and economic development. And like someone was asking me to make a case for the birdwatching vacation, maybe, I mean, that's the exact title of a TED talk. Maybe you can watch it and see what you think. But the case was, and it was actually featuring the story of the Cundinamarca Antpitta in a bit of a fictional story. So I like pitched that. They said they liked it, and then it's like a process that you actually work with a coach to do. It was a very different experience in an auditorium full of people. I got quite nervous, but I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed sharing this idea in ways that are accessible to the general public. Like as scientists, we sometimes communicate in these very kind of obscure, difficult to understand ways, and like the challenge of translating all of that into like 8 minutes of just conversation with a few pictures. I really enjoyed that. And I think it's been a good way to communicate this idea and to sort of get more people interested in like how you could do birdwatching tourism in ways that are more responsible.
Thank you. And I don't speak Spanish, so I apologize, but
Oh,
Natalia.
I can tell
Oh,
you
thank
what. Natalia is from Fundación Camaná and like the director and sort of local leader of this project. And she's replying to the question about GPS, saying we would love to do this, but it has to be of individuals that are not the same one that go to the feeder. Like we don't want to disturb the antpitta that comes to the feeder. And we have lots to research and investigate about this bird. So it's definitely something that we would love to do in the future. We're just not able to do it right now.
And one question I got was, what gives you hope despite everything going on in this world? What gives you hope about conservation?
I think um, we get in the weeds of conservation, like all the, documenting all of this at the spatial levels that I work, like country, global levels, and you can get depressed. And really, what I find gives me hope are people like Fundación Camaná and the Herrera family who are actually doing tangible conservation and doing the real work on the ground. And I think especially when I travel in Colombia and meet all these families who are protecting land, we just did a trip for 2.5 weeks, and every person I meet is just like completely excited and committed to this. And this is when I think like this is why we do what we do. We do it for the birds, but we also do it for these people who are really excited and doing actual conservation with our support in different ways. But it is those conservation champions and the birds. I go see the birds and they remind me why I sit on this desk every day.
I'm known as the person who documents how fast species are going extinct. So the question I get from journalists all the time is, how do I get up in the morning? Since I'm the purveyor of the bad news. And it's the same reason that Natalia has just explained. There's so much energy, so much activity, so many great people trying to save the planet, and the planet is so unbelievably beautiful. I don't have time to worry. I'm constantly being excited by what we see. Natalia, I think we're out of time. Is that right, Andy? We're at
Yes, we're out of time, but feel free to message us if you have any additional questions. This whole thing's going to be recorded and posted on our YouTube channel as well as our social media. Matt Cameron says tangible conservation. There needs to be more of this. I completely agree.
Yep, very much so.
And everyone that tuned in, if you want to support our work, if you want to support Natalia, please donate. Carol, I'll message you Natalia's email address. Get that to you, if that's all right, Natalia. And oh, there we go. Boom. It's already there. So save that. And Katie Holman says, wonderful. Thank you all. This will be on our Spotify and our Apple podcast. Exciting news. Our Apple podcast is now the 15th ranked podcast for nature on Apple Podcasts. So,
yay!
Michael, why don't we end it on this? If you had a magic wand, Michael wants to know, if you had a magic wand in the funds, what would you do to expand your important work? And we'll answer that, and then we'll end it on that wonderful note. Alvaro Ocampo says, excellent talk.
That's my dad, so it doesn't count. But yeah, what would I do? I would continue to fund local conservation projects like this one that work in areas that we've identified to be important and have sort of a disproportionate effect on conservation. But I would focus on these partnerships with local people because I do think that is the most important conservation. I know of other projects that are doing the same that would benefit from having funds to increase their conservation impact. And so I would really sort of like work on doing the science to channel those funds to where they're needed the most and where locals can really make that money go a long way in effective conservation, Michael. So yeah.
And that's exactly why we do what we do at Saving Nature. We founded Saving Nature 15 years ago because we wanted to empower local conservation groups, and we're very proud of being able to support Natalia and all the other wonderful people that we do. Thank you, Natalia. Thank you, everybody, for being here tonight, and we look forward to seeing you at our next event. I'm not quite sure when it is, Andy. Do we know who's coming up
next month?
Okay. All right.
Thank you, everyone.
Everybody.
Thanks for the
Natalia,
invitation.
thank you so much.
Stuart. Take care.
Yeah.
Bye.
Have a good evening. Bye bye.